Mic check. Cool. All right, I think we're ready to go. I tried making sure to take a lot more notes this time about, our today's topic, which I wasn't quite sure exactly what to title today's topic. I was thinking taboos, but in looking up different things on taboos, I'll probably still call it taboos, but looking up a lot of stuff on taboos, I found a lot of stuff that is sort of like very inappropriate to talk about. I was like, that's not really what I'm wanting to go for. So we're still gonna talk about some taboos and different things, just because I find them kind of, well, I have a funny story that I want to tell, which is sort of the inspiration for why I wanted to talk about different taboos. And some of the stuff I actually learned quite a bit from this that was really interesting that I didn't know before. So that'll be interesting thing to talk about. But yeah, when kind of like we're gonna kind of keep the conversation more to taboos that we can all kind of relate to, and funny things that we all do that maybe you don't talk about with others, things that like aren't necessarily weird or bad when you logically think about them, but still it's not something that you would want to tell, I guess, your mother, right? Some of the topics that I looked into or found when looking into different taboos and things like that, where profanity is a pretty common taboo. Oh man, Vsauce did a video on profanity, and I didn't realize this, but there's all kinds of types of profanity. We'll talk about that. That's pretty interesting. Money taboos, that's actually something I'm kind of passionate about, being that I've worked for so long. There are some things about money that a lot of people are just not comfortable talking about, and it's probably bad, actually. Bad for, yeah, anyway, we'll get into that later. Bodily functions, that's actually sort of what got me started on this. There's something that I do, which I think is totally normal. It's not something I go around talking about. Well, that's not true. I do talk about this quite a bit because I think it's pretty funny, but most people probably wouldn't talk about this. And I had a really funny conversation about this thing that I do that that's probably what we'll talk about first, actually, because it gives me a good chuckle to talk about this story. Let's see, coworkers, that kind of goes along the same lines of money. We'll talk about that together. Oh, foreign. Okay, so we'll talk about this a little now. There's a bunch of taboos that stem from culture. Japan is one that always comes to my mind, because in Japan they have like a bunch of things I feel like a lot of people know about that are taboo to do, that locals understand and foreigners don't. Like, one, for example, is you don't eat and walk. If you go somewhere and you need a snack, right, you'll stop at like a convenience store and like you'll grab your snack, you'll maybe sit outside, you'll eat your snack, you'll throw your trash away, and then you leave. You don't take the snack with you and eat it on the go, right? That's taboo. And for someone who isn't from Japan or doesn't understand that, it's like so weird. And that's a pretty common one. But instead of going with the normal like taboos and talking about other nations, being that I'm in America and I'm from America, I thought it might be interesting to figure out what kind of taboos like that are American. Because I never really thought about it. Like, what kind of things do we do that other countries think is just really weird? Yeah, that'll be a fun one to talk about. Job changing, we'll talk about that when we talk about money. That was another thing that I thought was really interesting. I don't even know if that's so much taboo as it is just, anyway, we'll talk about that later. There's a lot of taboos surrounded around sex. I don't think we're going to talk about that too much. Dating, there's a bunch of dating taboos. That's actually something I'm kind of passionate about as well. Okay, so here's a taboo we can talk about right now because it's just a short and quick one. I find this one pretty funny, but this is more a taboo in the past. So like if you have grandparents this is something that they might consider taboo because it used to be very taboo, but nowadays is completely normal. But visible bra straps, this is not something I've ever thought about in the past, or well, I've never really thought about just in general. But yeah, like apparently it was really weird to show your bra straps, so women would go out of their way to make sure that they're hidden. Nowadays, you go walking down the street, it's like, or actually maybe walking down the street, I guess that would make sense if you're in like New York, but like go to the grocery store or something, I don't think you could do a shopping trip through the grocery store without seeing a visible bra strap. And it's not weird or abnormal, it's totally social, and I like it. I don't think it shouldn't be, like it definitely, like it's not a problem, like who cares. But still very interesting to think about how taboo that was back in the day. Maybe like showing ankles, like you can't show your, yeah, I don't know. There's some more stuff on dating on here and marriage. Those are kind of more just interesting things we'll talk about later. Oh, here's another one I thought was kind of along the same lines as the visible bra strap. Another thing that was, and I don't, this is okay, so this is more something that was considered really taboo back in the day, but calling somebody after 9 p.m. And I was thinking about this and I was like, oh, like that's totally out the window now. No one cares about that anymore. But it's not really true. Like, so I feel like cell phones are what sort of broke this taboo. Okay? Because someone could call me on my cell phone at just about any time, and it's almost taboo now to just call someone out of the blue. Maybe that's just me, but I feel like text messaging has become the norm. And because of that, if someone just calls you out of the blue, it's like, who's calling me? Why are they calling me? Right? But if I had a landline, I think I would actually get very annoyed if people called me late at night, just because the phone's not next to me, right? It's somewhere in your house. So like if I'm like, say going to bed, it's like 10 p.m. or something, and I'm like getting ready for bed, right? And then my phone goes off, I gotta get up out of bed, I gotta walk across the house, like, you know, that's so annoying. So I feel like the whole calling after 9 p.m. taboo, I feel like still exists. It's just, like, I understand it, I guess is more of the point I'm trying to make, right? Oh, that was a really interesting one. I never even thought about that until recently. Let's see, I also looked at tattoos. Tattoos can be really taboo, but I don't know that there's a whole lot to talk about with tattoos. I think that's kind of like profanity. It's one of those things that like people do knowing that it's kind of like on the edge. It's like, ooh, I'm doing something permanent, something that, you know, and that's sort of like the whole point of tattoos. There's also a limit to that too, because like if you just get like, for example, a little spider tattoo on your ankle, it's I don't know that anyone really could consider that taboo. Like someone could be totally religious and know that someone has a spider and probably wouldn't really care, right? But you get a sleeve, like you tattoo like a whole sleeve, a whole arm, you're all of a sudden it's like that's really taboo to some people. I live in a very religious town too, so this is something that absolutely would be, I don't know if frowned upon is the right word, but definitely judged. So, all right, cool. So that's a bunch of the stuff I was thinking about talking about today. So we'll kind of make our way down that list. Okay, so the first one we were going to talk about was profanity. Now, I learned a lot about this, even though I didn't expect to. Oh, no, actually, sorry, I'm going off track. Before we talk about profanity, I wanted to tell you this interesting story. Well, I find it interesting about sort of why I chose to talk about taboos today. Okay, so there's this thing that I do, which I don't consider weird or abnormal. To me, this is like not a big deal at all. And I think in general, this is something that is not considered weird at all by the vast majority of the male population. Okay. But one day I'm hanging, I don't remember what the event was or if there even was an event, but I was visiting with my parents and my grandma was there, and my mom approaches me and she says, "We want to ask you a question." I'm like, okay. Now, to people who know me pretty well, I'm very analytical and I can be very open. But I often don't share my opinions too openly with strangers or people I don't know, because I tend to be very, like I said, very analytical. And so if my opinion on something is regarded as not popular, I kind of just don't care, right? And so I've got myself into a lot of arguments, and I've got myself, I don't want to say into a lot of trouble, but into a lot of awkward social situations, because I'll be like, oh, well, this is this way, and people don't agree with me, right? And they get all heated about it, and I'm just like, well, look at the facts, kind of a situation. Well, because of sort of my personality and the way I look at things and the way I talk with people, my mother knows that if she wants a very candid and open and honest answer, or like opinion to something, she'll ask me, right? And it's actually kind of great. I personally really like it. I mean, it's definitely given me some trouble down the road. I've learned to live with it. Anyway, so my mother comes to me with my grandma, and she's like, we have a question for you. And I was like, okay, sure, like a little confused, like, what's this about? And they're like, do you pee in the shower? And I was like, yes. And they're like, you don't think that's gross, right? And I'm like, well, I mean, no. And she's like, well, I mean, I guess it's not that, it's different for you, I guess, because you're a guy, right? And you guys will pee in a tree or pee in a bush or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I mean, that's true, right? For a guy, just peeing somewhere is not considered like weird, right? Like you go camping, you just go find a bush somewhere. That's probably why guys like camping so much more than girls. Actually, wait, I don't even know if that's true. I probably shouldn't have said that. Anyway, so yeah, it's not really that awkward for men for that reason, right? And I was like, well, I don't agree with that totally, because peeing, to me, the reason why I don't consider peeing in the shower to be weird at all is because I have a vague understanding of how plumbing works, right? And here's my shower in my bathtub or whatever, right? Maybe my bathtub's not the best example, but let's say my shower's here. What's right next to your shower? A toilet, right? Now those pipes probably connect right underneath, right? Like they probably, like, I don't know what direction they pipe because it's dependent on the house, but like say you've got like a pipe that goes out to the sewer going this way, right? Your toilet's going to connect here and your shower's going to connect right here. Like they're literally the same pipes going to the exact same location. Okay? The difference is that the toilet flushes and the shower is just a pipe with a hole, right? Like it's just drains, right? So obviously don't go number 2 in the shower, but if you're just gonna pee, like it's going to the same location. So what difference does it make, right? Like it also does. Also, have you ever gotten a pool or a bathtub or a shower and like you suddenly need to pee, but you didn't need to before? I feel like that happens every time, right? Why would I want to start the shower, jump in, oh, I need to pee, get out and use the toilet? Oh my goodness, that's so much work. Like, and you're gonna track water on the floor, you're gonna get the toilet seat all wet. Like, it just seems ridiculous. So obviously I'm just going to go in the shower, right? Now the counter argument that my family made was, well, for girls it's gross, because if you pee in the shower, it's gonna run down your legs, and it's warm and it's gross. And I was like, no, hold on, I get the point you're trying to make, however, you're in the shower. Like you're in the shower, you already have hot water pouring all over your body. Like, what's the big deal, right? Now I would still say it's taboo. Don't go around telling everybody, because they're going to be thinking the exact same thing you're thinking. Wow, they're just peeing on their legs. Like, gross. But it's also not gross, right? You see my point? Like who cares? I'll take it a step further too. This is the part where my sort of analytical brain sort of stepped it up a notch, and I was like, I could have just ended it there and been like, that makes sense. But I actually sort of, there's one other thing that I do that sort of, I don't know if it's grosser or it's definitely weirder. I'll blow my nose in the shower. Okay? Now, this is going to be the same no matter what gender, or I guess I should say what sex. This is going to be the same no matter what sex you are, okay? Because it's sort of along the same lines of if a girl was to pee, she's just basically peeing down her legs. Well, if I blow my nose in the shower, like I could do like the whole, like you put your finger on one nose and plug one nose and then just blow really hard and get it to shoot out the other side. I can't do that. I actually have a deviated septum, which is I think why it's so hard for me to do that. I could probably do it pretty well if I plug the left side and blow out the right, because my right side's a pretty open nasal passage. The left side I can barely breathe through though, so blowing my nose is somewhat difficult. So I have to two-hand it right into a tissue. But when you take a shower, it gets all steamy. And you're sitting there taking the shower, so I'll clean myself like I normally do, right? Wash my body, wash my hair, whatever, right? But about that point, like you've been in the shower for a little while, and I like hot showers too, I should probably mention, and so it gets very steamy in the shower. And when you're sitting there inhaling that and breathing that in, it sort of loosens everything up. So after I once I get to sort of that point, I'll just take my hands, cover my nose as if I had a tissue, but there's no tissue there, and just full on right into my hands, which again sounds disgusting, but I'm in the shower, so I literally just flip my hands over and wash them off in the shower, and we're good to go, right? Very gross, pretty taboo, I would think. However, also not gross, and like you're in the shower, it's where you clean yourself, so what's the big deal? Kind of along the lines of this sort of conversation is, in Japan, they do something that I think, I don't know if other parts of the world would think this is taboo, but in America we probably would. This actually blew my mind, and if I ever have my own house built, which I don't know that I'd ever be able to afford this, I want to have a bathroom like this made. But basically, in Japan, they'll have like a bathtub, but then like the entire floor of the bathroom is like water sealed, like watertight, and it will have a drain. So they'll sit like in the middle, and they'll have like their bathtub has like one of those extended or extendable like nozzles, I guess, and they'll clean themselves, not in the bathtub, but they'll clean themselves out where, like, basically a shower. Essentially, they're taking a shower before they get into the bathtub, right? But they clean themselves off, and then they soak in the tub and take a nice relaxing rinse in the tub, I guess. I don't know if rinse is the right word. And then when they're done, they don't drain the tub. Oftentimes, if it's a family, they leave that water in the tub because they've cleaned themselves. The tub water's clean because they cleaned themselves before they got in. So that water's still good. Why waste that water, right? So then the next family member will come in, they'll clean themselves, and they'll take a soak in the tub, and then, rinse and repeat until everyone's had their bath, right? But it gets even better. That water, again, should be clean because everyone should have cleaned themselves before using it. And I say clean because there's probably some small limitations to that, like I don't know, skin flakes or little bacteria, I don't know, whatever, but there's probably a little bit. So you don't want to drink this water, obviously, but they will still reuse this water. So their bathtubs will actually be, they can like flip a button for like a pump or something, and they can pump that water into their washing machine, and then they wash their clothes with that water. That blew my mind. I'm like, not only are you reusing the water for everyone in the household, because again, it's clean water, but you're also reusing that water to wash your clothes, and after washing your clothes, then they'll drain it, right? And I'm like, that is so, is economical the right word? It's such an ingenious thing, I think. I'm kind of blown away by this, and it just reminded me of that whole situation, or that whole conversation I had with family about the like the peeing in the shower, or how I like to blow my nose after getting a nice hot steam. Yeah, anyway, I don't know, you guys can let me know in the comments of this YouTube video whether you think I'm right or wrong. Am I disgusting? All right, so the next topic, we'll go back to profanity. This was pretty interesting to me. So my stance on profanity is I don't really consider, I feel like a swear word is only a swear word depending on context. Now I could say, we'll see, what's a good example of a word? I don't just want to sit here and just swear. the S word, right? The poop word. Okay. If someone uses that word in like a medical context, right? If they were using it in a medical context, they would probably just say feces. But my point is that used in specific situations, it's not really a swear word, right? But to expound on that, I don't really consider it to be a swear word. If, let's say I'm working on a car and I'm laying underneath this thing and I'm wrenching on something and I drop the wrench and it smacks me in the forehead and I'm like, shiz, right? I don't consider that to be much of a swear word because it's not being used aggressively. I find swear words to be swear words when you're using them to like demoralize or demean somebody, right? Like used in a way that's rude to someone, right? Otherwise, I always kind of just look at it like it's just a word. Well, except for when you yell shiz, you're saying it because frustration, and you want to get that frustration across. And this is where, when researching swearing, I learned some really cool stuff. So Vsauce did a video on this and said that, basically explained that there's actually different types of swear words. They're sort of categorized, and once you kind of understand those categories, all of a sudden swearing sort of like has a totally different meaning, right? So there's abusive swearing, which is the type of swearing I don't like, right? Like saying somebody's a dirty bee, or calling somebody, or even just calling somebody a slut. Like slut isn't necessarily considered a swear word in these days, but if you're like, you're a slut, I consider that to be as bad as any other swear word. There's supernatural swearing, which I don't think is very common nowadays, but this was pretty interesting. Supernatural swearing is basically the same type of swearing as abusive swearing. However, supernatural swearing is intended to hurt God. Abusive swearing is swearing to hurt an individual, but supernatural swearing is basically words that were considered to hurt God. Again, this isn't very common nowadays, but apparently it was back in, I don't know, 1800s, 1900s, maybe. I don't know. Probably not 1900s. Anyway. Well, no, maybe it would have been. Yeah, anyway, not important exactly what time period it was, but the point is that was kind of interesting to think that, there were words that people believed would hurt God. I think nowadays people kind of think if there is a God, that person's going to be like all powerful essentially, and some word that some person says, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Then there's swearing called empathetic swearing. No, not empathetic. Emphatic. This is hard for me to say. Emphatic swearing. That's the kind of swearing that like I'm totally fine with, right? Essentially, it's words that you say to convey a sense of frustration, right? So saying shiz, for example, right? It's like, oh, shiz, right? You're using the word because it has a bit of a taboo aspect to it, because that word is kind of considered, it has some weight to it. So swearing is actually kind of a really good thing because it allows you to say something. It's a word with some weight to it that has some force, and that's the entire point for why you're using it. For example, if any of these words weren't considered swear words, we would probably just come up with other words that would then become swear words. So there would always be words, and like all the words that we consider swear words now in I don't know, few generations might not be considered swear words at all anymore, and we'll have new words which are not good words, which will become the new swear words, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So bad words have power to them, and that's why we use them. Yeah, okay, it's cool. So that's about everything I want to talk about with profanity. Money. Oh, this one's one I'm kind of passionate about. So money is one of those taboos that really frustrates me because in all of the jobs that I've had, people say that you're not allowed to talk about how much you make at work. Now, this is not true, but companies want you to believe it. So pretty much anywhere you work, they're going to tell you not to talk about money, not to talk about how much you make. Don't tell people what you're making, kind of a thing, right? Don't talk about that. It's taboo. It's not right. You shouldn't do it, right? But there's some big reasons for why this is like one of those taboos that needs to be broken. Like, we need to get past this, because corporations and companies want to oppress us. They want to keep our pay. Actually, here's a very interesting point to this. People talk about the classes: lower class, middle class, upper class, and then there's like the 1% or whatever. Instead of looking at it like classes, people need to be looking at it like there are owners and there are workers. That's it. No classes, just owners and workers. Okay? And the reason why it's important to start looking at this from an owners and workers perspective: owner's goal is to, make money, which is the same goal for the workers, right? We're both trying to make money, but how we make money is completely different. If an owner can pay you less and that allows them to keep more, then that's not good for you. But you want to make more, right? So we basically, even though we're both trying to make money, the way we're trying to make money is completely at odds. Okay? So it doesn't really matter how much your coworker's making unless they're your boss, unless they're the owner, right? Because one of your coworkers, if they're making, $20,000 a year more than you, that sucks and you might be annoyed, but there's no reason for you to take it out on them. You should be taking it out on the owner, right? The owner is the one trying to keep your pay as low as possible. So it's in the owner's best interest that you don't talk about your pay, because one person might be able to fight and negotiate for more pay better than you, and you might even be a better employee. You might be a harder worker, right? Like, this owner, if it was a good owner, would try and pay his employees for what they're worth and pay them a fair living wage, but they're not going to do that because they want their money to be more. So yeah, talking about how much money you make with your coworkers is extremely important. And I don't know how this works in other countries other than America, but in America, I know it's considered really taboo to talk about how much you make, and it shouldn't be. You should absolutely talk about how much you make. And if a company tries to tell you you're not allowed to, understand that it is your right to talk about it. They cannot fire you for talking about your pay. They're not allowed to do that, right? So that's one of those things that's always really frustrated me, because I talk about my pay and I've got no problem talking about it. I don't exactly go around, I don't ask everyone else what they're getting paid, but if people are talking about it, I absolutely will tell them how much I'm making. I've got no problem with that, right? And usually by being open with it and talking about it in those kinds of situations, oftentimes my coworkers will tell me how much they're making, and it helps me to kind of figure out, is it worth being here? Like, when I was working in retail, I worked there for a while and realized I'm doing everything, right? I was doing the cashier stuff, I was doing the photo department stuff, I was doing the pharmacy stuff, I was doing a lot of I was training there. They were hiring these new supervisors to do things, and I had done that job for a couple of years. I stepped down from it because it was far too stressful and the pay wasn't really worth it. And then they started training me to train their new super, and I'm like, bruh, and then I found out sort of how much I'm making and how much my coworkers are making, and realized that some of them were making more than I was, and they were only managing or running one department. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And then tried negotiating for higher pay, and my boss wasn't willing to do it. And I was like, all right, fine. And I quit, right? I'm going to go somewhere else. It's not worth it to stay here for this kind of pay when I can go somewhere else and make the same and have a lot less responsibility. Anyway, pay, yeah, money. It's and then it gets worse. So because people think it's taboo to talk about money in this situation or other situations, people are bad with money, right? By not talking about it, a lot of people sort of they're just bad at dealing with money, right? If people were more open about talking with money, then people in general would be better at managing their money. because we're always talking about it, right? So by not talking about money, we get a lot of people who are just really bad at managing money and understanding what value there is to money. So it's hurting just everyone, the masses just in general. Oh, and then there's the generational gap when it comes to money. I actually have experienced this at I've experienced this a lot, but just recently I experienced this at my job. So, how do I explain this? So the older people that I am currently working with are getting kind of annoyed, and specifically when this conversation came up, I don't think that they were annoyed with the newer employees. I think they were more annoyed with the company, which is good. It's how it should be in this situation. But they're annoyed because the newer employees that are coming to work are getting paid a lot more than they were ever getting paid. Okay, so these employees have worked here for 30, 40 years, right? And they had to work their way up. They started at the bottom and they worked their way up to the point where they are now, where they're making, I guess, decent money. And they're mad because all these new employees are now coming in and making so much more than they ever did. And they're like, it's not fair, right? I think that this is a bit misconstrued, because if they're not happy with the amount of money that they're making compared to the new people, it's probably because the company isn't paying them fairly for what they're worth. The company is probably should be paying these experienced employees a lot more. I don't know. The other problem too is just that that's another problem that I feel like, I don't know how true this is, but a lot of people get competitive with each other over pay. But it makes way more sense to just be worried about how much you're making. Is it enough? That's it, right? Like, it's not important how much other people are making, as long as the amount that you're making is enough that you're satisfied with, right? I think a lot of, like, it's good to compare with other people, but if I was making like $50,000 a year with my current living situation, I feel like I'd be quite happy, right? And it's now, if I had more, I don't feel like, if I have more money, I'd be happier. It's more, I just feel like if I had enough money to pay for all my expenses and have plenty to do the things I want to do, then I wouldn't need more money, right? That's sort of like how I look at it. I don't need to make $1 million a year, right? Like even if I made like $100,000 a year, I feel like, investing would probably be a big thing. I want to make sure I can secure my future. So I feel like I'd probably be putting like $50,000 a year just into like something like a high interest savings account, or just putting it somewhere that would be smart. But then once, I've got that situated and under control, like all my debt's paid off, and I know I've got a retirement, I would probably end up I'd probably just start using that money to help people, because help my family. Like, my mom's car is in need of a lot of work. My dad's truck is he just got his new truck, which I'm sure he likes, but he could use a good truck, as opposed to, and there's all this stuff that's kind of just like, man, it'd be pretty cool to be able to help out family members, or do stuff to have that extra money as just disposable income. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm gonna reach over here and grab a drink. Throat's getting a little sore. But yeah, money. I feel weird even talking about it right now. I don't think it should be so weird to talk about money, and yet even just me talking about it in this context feels weird to me. My boss is gonna watch this and be like, "You're fired." Yeah, right. I don't think my boss even knows who I am, let alone care. All right, cool. So the next topic I want to talk about was foreign taboos, specifically taboos in America, because I always hear about these taboos that happen in other countries, but I've never paid attention to kind of what taboos are specific to America. This is kind of cool to look into. So, and I can totally see this one, but the first one is that Americans have a sort of like bubble. We have this bubble around us, our personal space. And if you stand too close to us, we get really weirded out. Like, Americans love their personal space. We love our bubble. We don't like people getting in our bubble, right? So there are some exceptions to this, I would assume. Obviously, there's exceptions to basically everything, but if you go to, like, I don't know, New York City and you ride a subway or something, it's going to probably be pretty tight, I would guess. So, like, we're understanding that there are situations in which people are cramped, and that's kind of how it is. But even still, like, if I'm at a theme park and I'm standing in line and it's a big line and there's people kind of getting too close to me, I'm understanding of the situation, but I still don't like it, right? And I thought this was pretty normal for everyone, but I guess not. I guess in other countries, it's just pretty normal for people to stand close to you, and so it doesn't really like bother them. It's almost like a tick here. It's like when someone's standing, like it's like this invisible bubble, and when someone's just kind of like just inside that bubble and they're just like there, it's like there's a tick going off in my head, and it's like, why are you standing so close to me? What are you doing? Like, what? Right? Yeah. Anyway, personal space. Yeah, Americans have this bubble. And this isn't so much a taboo, but it is something that kind of goes along the same lines of the personal bubble, where I mentioned public transportation. America does not have public transportation, or at least we have very, very little of it. There are some places where it is better, but in general, America just doesn't have public transportation. It's so big here too. Like, America is basically just, what is it, 50 countries, right? We call them states, but every one of them is kind of like run different, and it's so big. Everything is so big, right? I had a conversation with a friend of mine who lives near London, and we were talking to another person who was in Vrchat, who was part of the friend group, who lives in, I think it was Berlin. And I was like, oh, I don't actually, like, I'm not very good with geography, and so I had to pull up Google Maps, and I was like, where is Berlin in compared to London? Because I have a general idea about where London is, but I look it up and it's like, oh, Berlin's like right there and London is like right there, so they're pretty close. And I like Google Maps, like, if you were to drive from here to there, how long would it take? And Google Maps is like, oh, it'd probably take like 4 hours. And I'm like, oh, you guys are pretty close to each other. And like, he's in a different country. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah. And I'm not saying that, like, I mean, I don't know how hard it is to cross the border to go to, but like, I mean, if you wanted to spend a weekend and go see this person, like, my point is that you could, it wouldn't be that hard. And they're like, you don't seem to understand. Like, he's in a totally different country, right? Like, and I'm like, it's a 4-hour drive, right? Maybe it's a little bit more complicated than I think, but even still, we're talking like half a day at worst case scenario, right? Like, I'm so confused what the heck you're talking about. And they just kind of pestered me and made fun of me for thinking that they're close. So as an example, I went on Google Maps and I looked at my state. And for me, just to drive to the capital of my state, which is about halfway across my state, okay? Like, I'm not on the far side of the state. I'm like in the middle, and the capital's down like here, right? Okay? So, or I say down here, like on just across. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that for me to drive just halfway across my state would take 5 hours. 5 hours, and I haven't even left my state, right? Let alone my country, right? So when he's freaking out about a 4-hour drive to Berlin, I'm so confused. It's because, yeah, it's just everything is so spaced out in the US, right? And because of that, you just don't have much public transportation. Everyone has cars. Like, it's just everyone has cars, right? I guess that could be considered a taboo. In America, everyone owns a car, whereas in other countries, it's like, why would I need to own a car? Actually, I think this is my friend that lives near London. He doesn't have a driver's license, and the guy is like the same age as me. It blows my mind that he's like, I had a license basically the moment I was old enough to own one. I had a car before I had a license. How weird is that? Oh, sales tax. That's another really weird thing. I don't know if this classifies as a taboo either. It would probably seem taboo to a foreigner coming to America, but everything has a sales tax. So when you go to a store and you see something that says $9.99, it's not going to cost $9.99. It's going to be $9.99 plus whatever that state's sales tax is, right? Say 6%, right? So you got to take $9.99 times that by 6%. That gives you your new total, right? And that's really weird for anyone not. I think that's only an American thing, right? Which I've always just thought was normal, but it does make shopping very annoying and difficult because you have to kind of like, well, how much is this going to cost? For me, I always round everything up, right? Like I always just kind of round everything up, and that gives me a general ballpark of about what I'm going to be paying when I go to the checkout, and then it always ends up being a little bit more. So when you go shopping and you're just buy like 5 things and then your total comes out to like $50, you're just like, oh. It literally just happened to me today, actually. What did I buy? I bought a slice of cake, some almonds, and what did I go there for? I went there for something specific. I bought some cereal. Oh, I went there for some energy drinks. I bought a couple energy drinks. And yeah, I want to say I'm forgetting something anyway, but my total came out to like, I think it was actually like $30, but it was just like, holy crap. Always comes out more than you expect. And that's really hard for foreigners when they come to America. Tipping culture is another really crazy thing. This one kind of goes back to Japan, because I heard when I was talking to some of my Japanese friends, they mentioned that you don't tip in Japan. It's considered very rude, right? Like the business pays their employee. If I tip their employee, it's kind of like me saying that the business isn't paying their employee enough. It's an insult. It is rude of me to say or to do this under the sort of like businesses like control, right? So it's considered really rude, very taboo to tip. But in America, it's the opposite. Like you are expected to tip, right? There are some situations in which you wouldn't tip. Like if I was just going to a fast food place, you don't tip, but I think they would still want you to tip, because a lot of these places you go to, they have like a tipping jar, right? And these businesses will, I don't know, this is such a tricky subject, right? Anyone who's from America just kind of understands that you're supposed to tip. I hate tipping, right? I think tipping is so stupid. I hate tipping personally. And so I even worked in the restaurant business. I was a cook, but I worked there for a couple of years. And when I would talk about this, people would get like all worked up about it. And I get why they're getting worked up, but
we've got hugs and hat pats.
Silken, hey, thanks. Welcome to sort of the first segment of my stream. I'm doing a little podcast right now. We're just talking about some different taboos and fun things like that. Silken says America refuses to pay their workers. Yeah, it's cheap labor. Yeah, you know the weird part. Okay, so kind of back to what I was saying. Actually, before I get on that, let me explain something really quick. So I stream every Saturday from noon to 6. Noon to 6 my time. And to sort of like fill out that time, I decided to try practicing podcasting. So the first hour, I choose a subject and I just talk about some subject for the first hour. So those of you who are listening to this, maybe on a podcast, or maybe you're watching this on YouTube, if you hear some notifications, that's where those are coming from. And if you want to come and maybe participate in the podcast, you can come in, and for the first hour, you can come and hang out and tell me if I'm stupid because I think tipping culture is dumb or something, you know. But yeah, so I work in the restaurant industry, and people would get heated because I would talk about how I hate tipping. And it was interesting because one argument I always seemed to be hit with, specifically from people who would receive the tips, like the wait staff, they would almost get like act like tipping needs to be a thing, because otherwise they wouldn't make enough money, right, to live, right? And I'm like, okay, so why is that a problem? Do you know, like, the problem here isn't that tipping is needed, it's that the business should be paying you more. It's like you're like, oh no, you have to tip, otherwise they don't make enough money. And it's like, why doesn't the business pay them? I'm so confused why you're attacking the customer instead of attacking the person who isn't paying you, right? Like, my finger doesn't want to work. What's going on here? Anyway, that's part of the reason why I would get so annoyed. The other thing too is I found out how much at the place I worked at, I found out how much the wait staff actually make, and it was actually kind of insulting in its own right, because I was bringing home, like, I don't know, $850, $900 a paycheck, and I was getting paid every 2 weeks. And I found out they're bringing home like $1,500 or $1,600 a paycheck, and the company is only paying them like, I want to say they were paying like $4.50 or $5 an hour, right? And they can technically get away with paying less than minimum wage, so long as the amount they get plus tips is over minimum wage. It's like, holy crap, that's a loophole, right? Like, they don't even have to pay minimum wage. So it's good for the business, and it ends up being good for them, because they're making it made me so mad, right? Because it made me so mad. And they would stand around and talk all the time, which was especially infuriating, because I'm back there cooking food, and they'd go out, help a table, come back, and they wouldn't have anything to do for like 15 minutes or something. And maybe that's an exaggeration, 15 minutes, but like 5-10 minutes. And so they'd be sitting there on their phone, or they'd be sitting there visiting with each other, and I'm back here just flipping burgers and trying to make sandwiches. And it was like I was always do work, right? And I'm getting paid like, maybe not half, but I'm getting paid quite a bit less. And I'm like, man, I want to be a server. And I joked about this with my boss all the time, about how I'm going to become a server, I'm going to work at the bar or whatever. And she was like, nope, because I'm too good of an employee, I can't go do that kind of work. And it was just like, I don't know, I got tired of some of the stupid, a lot of this stuff just seems to go over their head. Like, they don't even seem to understand. And I'm just like, I want money. Tipper, and wait staff make more money. Let me become a server. Like, I get that you're paying me less, but at the same, I don't know, it's tipping. Now, I should also clarify, I hate tipping. And so people are like, well, what do you do when you go to eat out? And I'm like, I don't. So that's the thing. I don't want to be seen as a bad person, right? Because if I go to a restaurant and I eat and I don't tip, I'm an asshole. So I just don't eat out at those places, right? So I just don't. Places like that that have the sort of tipping culture, I just don't eat there at all, right? I would just sooner go to a fast food place, or just go and get the ingredients at a grocery store and just make the food myself, right? So it's so weird, and I hate tipping so much that I just don't eat at those places, period. I avoid those places, right? And even when my family goes, I still try, like family or friends, they want to go eat out at a nice restaurant, I still just hate going to those places. That's like the only situation I might, but even still I avoid it. My family actually went to eat at an Applebee's just for Christmas, and I was like, no, sorry, I'm a little bit busy, but I can meet up with you guys after. I hate tipping. I hate tipping culture so much. Oh yeah, pizza. Oh yeah, pizza is another bad one. And then delivery drivers, oh, that's another bad one. Oh, that's so bad. Yeah, they get paid so little. Oh, also, I heard that these companies will like milk the employees too. Like specifically the delivery drivers. I've heard that a bunch of these places will have a delivery driver, and their job is just to deliver pizza, right? But when they come back and there's not an order to go out, what does the delivery driver do? Well, a lot of them will just kind of sit in their car and kind of wait for the next delivery or whatever, right? But then these companies will be like, you're just sitting on your ass. You might as well come in here and wash some dishes or something, right? And it's like, you're paying me $2 an hour, right? Go F yourself. You want someone to wash your dishes, pay a dishwasher, right? But they don't want to do that, because the dishwasher probably gets paid like, I don't know, $8, $9 an hour, right? But you could pay the delivery driver, who's only getting paid $2 or $3 or $4 an hour, to do that for you. And oh man, these freaking loopholes are so, I hate tipping culture. Interesting, since I'm getting so annoyed by this, let's talk about, so I looked into this and I found out the reason why tipping culture is a thing in the United States, and this actually kind of blew my mind. So it actually started with the Depression. So back when the Depression happened, businesses could no longer pay their employees. So they started telling their employees, because I guess before the Depression, it was considered weird and taboo to tip. So people didn't. Well, when that happened, business owners basically started telling the employees, look, I can't pay you all the money I need to pay you. Like, I just don't have the money, right? So you should start accepting, if someone wants to offer you extra money, you better take it, because, and then it sort of just became a thing. And then after the Depression, and we've come out of it and things are better now, businesses sort of took advantage of that. Right? They're like, oh yeah, keep taking those tips because it means I don't have to pay you as much, right? So tipping is just considered normal now ever since. And again, this comes back to businesses, corporations, whatever. They're all just in it. They're owners. They're owners and they want to line their pockets as much as they can. So they're going to do what they can. Whereas workers, they try to get their money the opposite way, where they're trying to, they try to work hard, or the whole, what is it called? Silent quitting. That is another whole pot of crap that yeah. Anyway, what were we? Let's go back to sort of the different taboos. I'll sit here and talk. I could talk for an hour just on tipping. Let's see here. What were we talking about? We talking about personal space, transportation, tipping, smoking. Oh, actually, this is one I thought kind of interesting. So smoking is considered bad for you. And I think just in general, everyone knows smoking is bad for you. Like, there's not really any argument against that at this point, right? Well, smoking has sort of evolved into something that's taboo. It wasn't really taboo before, but now it is. And it's become so much of a taboo that it's actually like, if a foreigner comes to America, apparently in other countries, I don't know specifically which ones, but smoking is a lot more normal. And when they come to visit America, they want to smoke, but they don't realize you can't just smoke anywhere. Like, you need to go to designated areas to smoke, right? And that can be very difficult. So like, if you smoke, like if that's something specifically like cigarettes, well, I guess other things too, but who's smoking a cigar in public? You need to know and go to, and I'm actually kind of excited about this because I feel like it's such a good thing, because I don't like smoking. I think smoking is just gross, and I don't mean gross in the sense that like, oh, what does it do to your body? I mean, it just smells bad, and it's just like, I just don't like smoking, right? So I found that really interesting to think that smoking is one of those things that like wasn't taboo, and it has suddenly become very taboo. Specifically in the US, cigarettes are just really gross and people don't like them anymore. Another thing that foreigners might think is very taboo in America is that we only use the imperial system. And I actually like the metric system. Personally, I really like it. I'm not good at using it because I don't practice it, because we don't really use the metric system in the US. But oh yeah, it's actually, oh man, this is, growing up, I've had to do different work on my cars, and it's so much cheaper to do work on your own cars that's how I sort of have always done work on my cars. My current vehicle is pretty new, and I'm trying to keep up on the maintenance, and so because it's a new car, it actually has warranties, and in order for me to keep those warranties valid, I am required to have like record that the maintenance is being done at its intervals. If I don't do the maintenance, then my warranties are invalid. So I'm now going to a mechanic because they give you the inspection sheet and then like the work that they did, and that works. Anyway, so I've always done, before this vehicle, I've always done my own work on my own cars. And with cars, they all use metric. And I'm pretty sure the reason why is, in America, they might design a car, but all the parts might also be made in America, but they will, or they're probably not, they're probably made in China, but they'll ship all these parts overseas, it'll get assembled, and then it comes back. Well, everyone uses the metric system everywhere else, so everything is metric, right? So all these years I've been working on cars, I've always used the millimeter wrenches, not the fraction wrenches, right? Because the fraction ones are imperial, the millimeters are all metric, right? And so a lot of times I'll be working on, like, if I get my dad's help, for example, right, I'll be like trying to find a socket or something, and I'll be like, oh, hey, can you hand me like a 9mm socket? And he'd be like, are you sure it's 9mm? Yeah, I'm pretty sure, right? And he'll hand me like I don't know what the closest is to 9mm, so I'm probably way off on this, but behind me like a 7/16. And I'm like, no, I need a 9mm. And they'd be like, well, that should work. But like they never fit just right, right? Any of the Imperial sockets, you put them on and they got that play. And I hate that because I don't want to strip it. And I've stripped plenty of them in the past and it freaking blows. So I want it to be the right socket for the right part, or otherwise, so I've just, all these years I just got used to, so I guess you could say that I'm pretty used to the metric system when it comes to working on cars because everything's like millimeters. But outside of that, I don't use it much. There is one situation. So I just designed a wrench recently for work, and we have a laser cutter. Well, they laser cut on these huge sheets, and they have like the scrap metal. Well, there's a lot of sections on that scrap metal where they could cut like a little something, but there's nothing that they cut for the job. So I was like, I'm gonna design a wrench because the wrench we've been using is not the right size, and instead of trying to get the company to buy a wrench, or instead of I'm going to design my own wrench and have them cut it out on one of those pieces of scrap. And I sort of learned that in measuring to try and get all the specifications just right, if I do it in inches, everything comes out to like 0.76 or 0.88 or but if I do it in metric, it will be in, millimeters, and I can be more accurate and get better measurements. And so that was a situation in which I found metric to be easier as well. Holy crap, we only have a few minutes left, technically, but smoke. Silk said smoking is crazy sexualized nowadays. You think so? I mean, you definitely see it in movies, don't you? Where like you'll have some sort of, what's the right word? Debonair. I don't know if debonair is the right word, but you'll have this person and it's like, yeah, I guess that's a good point. You know what? You know what it's like? It's like swearing. It's like profanity. It's like what we were just talking about a minute ago, where saying a swear word has power because it's a swear word. It's sort of like smoking is sort of considered taboo, and so it has weight to it. It has sort of like meaning behind it. It's not, right? Yeah, that's kind of a cool way to look at that. Let's see. So we were talking about some foreign taboos. Oh, I guess another one. I was going to talk about like some politics or gun control. Okay, yeah, we can talk about this just a little bit. I don't really like talking about politics, so we're not going to talk too much about that. But very specifically, I'll say that when foreigners come to America, politics and gun control are two things that people in America are extremely passionate about. And it's sort of like blows a lot of foreigners away, and it's something that we don't really think about here, but yeah, like I said, someone from another country will come here and they might want to just be like, why do they do this, and it might be some conversation about politics, or be like, they might say something like they don't like guns. Next thing you know, they're in a heated argument with a bunch of people about how stupid they are or something. Definitely something to watch out for. But okay, so I guess we'll try and wrap up. All the hottest femme fatale smoke, yeah. Holy crap, I did a pretty good job with research. I have a whole nother topic to talk about, and we've already hit an hour. So we'll kind of breeze through this last little section. But dating taboos was the last thing that I looked up. And I found that some of these were pretty interesting. Some of these I didn't actually think too much about before, and then some of these I am very passionate about. We'll talk about, let's talk about the one that I'm really passionate about first. This one actually kind of triggered. This is one of the reasons why I don't really date, this is the reason why I don't date anymore. Who pays on the first date? Okay. But even more so, who's supposed to pay in a relationship? Okay. And this is kind of like, as we've developed as a society, women have got more and more rights, which is great, but they still want men to be gentlemen. But the thing that's really irritating here is that everyone can be a gentleman, right? Like, this is not a one or the other way. And like, girls paying on the first date is considered to be sort of like taboo. But why? Right? And that's like, I used to do a lot of dating, and it was so expensive. And you always hear, oh, it doesn't have to be expensive, you can just plan a date and do this or that or whatever, and it doesn't have to be expensive. And I'm like, okay, so I have two arguments to that. The first, if you like this girl, or if you like this person, or I guess in this case, excuse me, then you want to impress them, so you don't want to do some cheap date, right? And then the other problem is that even stuff like as simple as like dinner and a movie adds up really quickly when you're paying for two people, right? But I would tell people all the time that a date easily is going to be $50 a date. And like, what, $50? This is also years and years ago. It's even more true now. But it gets expensive when you're going on dates with different people and trying to meet a nice person, and you're paying $50, $60, $70 every time you go out. It's just like, I can't keep paying this kind of money. It's so expensive. My argument to this is that if you go on a first date with someone, I think you should both just pay for yourselves. Okay, I'll pay my way, you pay your way, and then and to me it makes sense, because on the first date you're sort of feeling each other out, right? You're trying to figure out, do I like this person? Would I want to go on another date with this person? Is this person funny? Whatever. Okay. And because you're both sort of like in this mentality of, on that first date, of like, whether you do or don't like this person, it makes sense that you would just pay for yourself on that first date. Now, on the second, third, fourth, whatever date, I would say that it's a little bit different. Okay. So let's say, we go on our first date, okay, and I like you, so I ask you to go on a second date, right? At this point, you know, and I know that I'm interested, right? So I'm willing to sort of like go out there and I'm like, I'll pay. At this point, it's kind of like, I'll pay for the second date, right? Because at this point, I am interested, or at least I think I'm interested. So now it's like, I want to leave a good impression. I want to, you know, but I feel like it should go both ways, right? So if the other person thinks that, you know, if they're the person that asked me out on a date, on the second date, at this point it's like, you know, they think that they could be interested in me, so they want to, you know, and maybe that's how it should always be. I mean, it could be like a back and forth, right? But then again, that same argument could be made for the first date, right? Because if I ask someone out on the first date, then I have to pay. My argument to that, however, is that I have stopped asking people on dates, and I have not been on a date in a while. But that's also because I don't want to date. But to be fair, I haven't been asked to, I just don't get asked out on date. Well, maybe speaking, I don't know, maybe that's not even popular. Maybe I'm ugly, maybe I have a bad personality, I don't know. But the point is that guys in general, if they would just stop asking girls on dates, I feel like that there would just be significantly less dates happening. Which is kind of, if you were to like, who the person who asked the person on the date is the person who has to pay, then yeah, I know there's so many problems. I hate dating. Can you tell? I'm getting kind of annoyed just talking about it right now. But yeah, no, that's so we're already past an hour, so let me just kind of thumb through some of these ideas here. Let's see. Dating, there's social status, like, so there could be some taboos related to, you know, this I feel like is more common in other countries. I don't know if social status, no, maybe it does matter here too. Although I feel like social status doesn't matter so much in America. It's more so just how much money you make. Like if one person makes a lot of money and the other person doesn't, it's kind of considered weird or taboo. Like, why is that person with them? You know, like, is she a gold digger, or is he desperate, or, you know, whatever the situation is. Oh, public display of affection. That's an obvious taboo. Like, making out with someone out in public, far more common I feel like in the States, but in other countries it's even worse. Oh, this one's interesting. Previous partners, right? Like, how weird is it to ask someone you're dating about their previous partners. Like, I've never really thought of it as being that weird because I don't get too like jealous about that kind of stuff. But apparently that is a very big taboo. Like, you shouldn't be asking someone about who they were with before you, right? Makes sense when I think about it, but also not something I'd thought about before. Date one person at a time. That's a pretty obvious taboo. You don't want to go around dating multiple people. I feel like that's pretty straightforward. Obviously, if you're married, I feel like that's so obvious, but I also feel like it's so incredibly common. I've been cheated on in pretty much every relationship I was in, and so it seems like it should be pretty obvious, but at the same time, maybe it isn't. I don't know. Girls making the first move, we talked about that. Oh, living together before marriage. I feel like that's really important, but it's apparently quite, and I live again in a pretty religious area, so here it's very common that people don't have sex and don't move in together until they're married, and then after they're married is when they move in together and everything else. Having a child outside of marriage, that's I feel like that is just bad preparation. And so, but yeah, I consider really taboo. I feel like that's a taboo that will probably be around for a long time. Because like if you want to have a kid, that's a very big decision, financially, responsibility, all this stuff, right? And so you really should be prepared for a kid, and it should be a planned thing. And so marriage just kind of makes a lot of sense. Like, you should probably be married before you have a kid. And if you get pregnant before you have a kid and you want to keep the kid, you should probably like you get married and get that sort of like stuff figured out personally. Oh, keeping your maiden name. This is one I don't care about at all, but oftentimes women will take the man's last name, but sometimes they'll keep their maiden name for whatever reason. I personally like that idea. I couldn't care less, but it's apparently very taboo to some people that you should, probably more so in the past, I bet it's less so now, that, you know, the girl would always take the maiden name. Oh, and then the last one was you should never ask a girl her age, her weight, or her height. And yeah, I mean, in certain contexts I fully understand that, but at the same time I feel like just as men in general are very who, what, when, where, and why. So like if they're just like, oh, how tall are you? They're not asking it to be rude. But it oftentimes gets construed as being very rude. I actually just saw a video the other day that was very interesting. Basically, this guy said that he likes to just call people love. Like, oh, hey, love, kind of a thing. And he said, it doesn't matter if you're transgender, it doesn't matter if you're male, it doesn't matter if you're female, if you just call them love, it's sort of like all encompassing and you can't go wrong. I was like, man, that's so smart. I really liked that. I might start doing that, especially since on my streams and I'm always saying I love you to people. Maybe I'll just start calling people love. I'll pick that one up. But yeah, no, that's basically everything that I wanted to talk about today. Again, if you want to come and say participate in this little podcasting segment of my stream, just jump on Twitch. My channel's Cup with K. I'll upload this probably Monday to YouTube. So if you guys watch it there, thanks for stopping by. And yeah, I love you guys. Let me catch up on chat. All that talking I did, I'm way behind on chat. Let's see what you were talking about, Silk.